This game is from the FIDE World Cup in 2023, and it features a matchup between Magnus Carlsen, white, and D. Gukesh, black. White starts by e4 and black push c5. The game starts with the Sicilian defense, one of the most popular openings in chess. c3, so d5. Black immediately challenges the center by attacking the d4 pawn. E cross d5, then queen cross d5, white recaptures the pawn on d5 with the queen. d4 knight f6. Both players continue developing their pieces, with black's knight moving to f6. Knight f3 of e6, black solidifies its pawn structure and prepares to develop its light-squared bishop. Bishop e2. C cross d4, white recaptures on d4 with the c3 pawn, opening up the position. C cross d4. Knight c6, the knight moves to c6, aiming for central control. Now white gets castling, then black's bishop goes to e7, white castles kingside, ensuring the safety of the king. Knight to c3, then queen to d6, black develops the queen and connects the rooks. Knight to b5, and here queen to d8, white introduces a knight to b5, putting pressure on black's position. By a hop to f4, then knight to d5, black defends against the potential threat from white's knight. Bishop to g3, then black also castle, white continues developing while black castles kingside. Rook c1, then bishop to d7, white places the rook on the c1 square, and black reinforces the d7 square. Knight to c3, then queen to b6, white retreats the knight to c3, and black attacks the b2 pawn. Bishop to c4, and knight goes to f6, white's bishop moves to c4, eyeing the f7 square. Black reinforces its knight on f6. Here white's knight a4, so queen a5, white leaps the knight to a4, defending the c5 pawn and putting more pressure on black's position. Knight to c5, then bishop to c8, white voluntarily gives up the knight on a4, and black repositions its bishop to c8. Then a3, and here queen goes to d8, white supports the b2 pawn with the move a3, and black's queen relocates to d8. Bishop to b5 and queen to b6, white puts a second bishop on b5, putting more pressure on black's position. Black counters by attacking the b2 pawn again. White pushes a4, then rook d8, white advances the pawn to a4, tightening its grip on the position. Black develops the rook on d8. Queen e2, and rook goes d5, white's queen moves to e2, freeing the d1 square for the rook. Black counters by activating the rook on d8 and targeting the f5 square. Now in this battle, bishop cross c6 and queen cross c6, white initiates a series of exchanges, capturing on c6 with the bishop. Black recaptures with the queen. Here white played b3 and rook goes to d8, white's bishop takes control of the c4 square, while black protects its pieces. Now bishop to h4 and queen to d5, white places the bishop on h4, indirectly supporting the pinned d4 pawn. Black moves the queen to d5, threatening the rook on c4. Rook came to check on e1 ans. Black pushes b6, white doubles the rooks on the e-file, while black advances the b-pawn. Knight to e4 and bishop to b7, white's knight moves to e4, pressuring black's position. Black counters with a strong bishop move, attacking the weak d4 and h4 squares. Bishop cross f6 and black bishop cross f6, white sacrifices its dark squared bishop for black's strong knight on f6. Knight cross f6 check, then g cross f6, black recaptures with the g7 pawn, opening up the g-file and weakening the pawn structure. Queen to e3 and rook to ac8, white's queen moves to e3, aiming to invade black's position. Black reinforces the rook on the c8 square. White push h3 and queen to f5, white prevents any possible back rank issues by moving the h2 pawn. Black improves its queen's position, aiming to trade queens. Knight to h2 and queen goes to g5, white's knight moves to h2, preparing to potentially defend its king's position. Black forces a queen trade to simplify the position. Knight to g4 and king to g7, white attacks black's queen, and black moves its king to g7 to avoid any tactics. White push a5 and queen cross e3, white launches a tactical shot, sacrificing a pawn to open up the position and gain activity. Black captures on e3, opening files and lines for both sides. And cross e3 or cross d4, white recaptures on e3 with the knight. Black captures the d4 pawn with its rook, gaining material. R cross c8 b cross c8, white captures the c8 rook, simplifying the position and equalizing material. Rook to c1 and bishop to d7, white activates its rook on c1. Black's bishop moves to d7, improving its position. Rook to c7, white's rook shifts to c7, attacking black's a7 pawn.
e6.
Cross a5, black captures the pawn on a5, keeping material equality. Rook cross a7 so a4, white's rook captures the a5 pawn, and black replies with a pawn advancing to a4. Cross a4 and black's bishop cross a4, white captures the a4 pawn with its rook. Black recaptures on a4 with the bishop. Rook to a5 and king goes to g6, white's rook retreats to e5, and black's king moves to g6, preparing to defend its pawns. White push g4 and bishop to c6, white's g4 pawn advances, creating weaknesses in black's position. Black's bishop moves to c6, defending critical squares. Rook to c5 and bishop to e4, white's rook moves to c5, applying pressure. Black's bishop retreats to e4, further securing the position. King to h2 and rook to d3, white's king moves to h2, improving its position. Black's rook moves to d3, potentially doubling on the d-file. King to g3 and black's pawn goes to f5, white's king moves to g3, preparing for further pawn advances. Black plays f5, initiating counterplay. King to f4 and black to f6, white's king moves to f4, aiming to restrict black's pieces. Black advances f6, defending its position and restricting white's king. Then g cross f5 check and bishop cross f5, white captures the f5 pawn with the g4 pawn. Black recaptures with the bishop. Knight cross f5 and e cross f5, white captures on f5 with the knight. Black recaptures with the pawn, creating a passed pawn on the f-file. Here pawn to f3 so rook to d4 check, white's pawn advances to f3, defending its position. Now king to g3 and king to g5, white's king moves to g3, avoiding any potential checks. Black's king advances to g5, preparing active play. Rook to c2 then black played h5, white's rook moves to c2, defending its pawn. Black's h-pawn advances to h5, creating more threats. Rook to a2 and black pushed f4 to check, white's rook moves to a2, creating counterplay and potential threats. Black's f-pawn advances to f4, further attacking white's position. King to h2 and king to h4, white's king moves to h2, seeking shelter from potential checks. Black's king advances to h4, preparing to penetrate white's position. King goes to g2 and rook goes to d7, white's king moves to g2, improving its position. Black's rook moves to d7, preparing to target white's pawns. White's rook goes to b2 and rook goes to d3, white's rook moves to b2, aiming to defend its pawns. Black's rook advances on the d-file, putting pressure on white's position. King to g2 and black's king to g5, white's king moves to g2, consolidating its position. Black's king moves to g5, attacking white's position further. Rook moves on b5 check, so black push f5, white's rook moves to b5, applying pressure to black's king and pawns. Black's f-pawn advances to f5, expanding its control and preparing possible pawn breakthroughs. Rook to b2 and king to f6, white's rook moves to b2, ensuring that the second rank is well defended. Black's king advances to f6. Then h4 and king to e5, king moves to h4, attacking black's pawns and restricting its possible moves. Black's king moves to e5, activating and preparing further pawn advances. And here king to f2, white's king moves to f2, and the players agreed to a draw in an equal position.
Yeah!